Hello, Louie.
And hello, Matthew. How are you doing?
Could you a little bit more enthusiastic? Welcome to whatever podcast, whatever episode it is. I'll start again, for Christ's sake, this is rubbish. Welcome to the next episode of the Existential Files. So, hello, Louie.
Hello, Matthew.
That's more like it. Bit more upbeat. So, what's on your mind?
Well, I mean, I woke up this morning and I remembered a little factoid that I like to tell people when I'm having a conversation. It doesn't happen very often. The cats aren't massively impressed by it. But and I find that the world splits into two types of people. You know, people that go, "Oh, that's bloody fascinating," or I couldn't think of anything more boring. And I do think it's an interesting thing. So I thought
this could be a miniature personality test. We can decide, are we one of these people who go, that's fascinating, or
yeah,
whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, blow me away.
Well, I have been told. I remember I told two people this once, and they said that was the most boring fact I could possibly have told them. So we will just see, right?
Okay, shoot.
So the question then is, or am I going to ask you, how old, perhaps you know already, by the way, but how old is the light that when you stand there in the sunlight and it touches your face on a morning, how old is that light?
See, I'm going to probably go down the route of this is going to be quite a fascinating one. So it's going to be older than you think, but I have no idea. I've got no gut intuitive feeling of essentially how long it takes the light to come from the sun to Earth, is what you're saying, isn't it?
That's right. Well, how old? No, well,
how old it is.
I'm asking you, how old is that light? Now, I think it takes about 8 minutes. If I'm right, I'm just checking my George Gamow book, 1, 2, 3, Infinity, brilliant little science book. It takes about 8 minutes for light to get from the surface of the sun in a straight line to Earth. 8 minutes, right? So
you'd be telling me it's not 8 minutes old then?
So I'm telling you, it's not 8 minutes old.
Oh, I don't know the answer to this one, Louie. I'm getting on my tenterhooks here.
Oh, well, okay. Would it surprise you? And I'm going by George. I've seen various estimates, but I'm going to go by George Gamow because he knew what he was talking about. George Gamow estimates it as being 5,000 years, and it takes light 5,000 years to actually get out of the sun once a photon has been emitted inside it. Now, I find that pretty fascinating that when I stand there in the sun, that photon was produced 5,000 years ago. And why has it taken 5,000 years, to get out of the sun? Any ideas?
Absolutely, because you're going to tell me?
I can tell you if you like, or if you've got any ideas.
I would like you to tell me, because at the moment I'm fascinated by the fact that it's taken 8 minutes to get pretty much from wherever it is near the sun or the surface of the sun to me. So if the last 8 minutes of those 5,000 years have traveled that distance, what's been happening in the 5,000 years minus 8 minutes up to that point?
Sure. Well, it would take, if there wasn't a sun there, if it was a single photon moving, it would take it 2 seconds to cover that distance on top of the 8 minutes. So we've gone 2 seconds to 5,000 years, which is a big difference, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right. So what is it doing for those 5,000 years? I've kind of given you a clue a little bit. If you take away the sun, it only takes 2 seconds. So I think.
But still, are we talking? But still, what's happening in those 5,000 years? Is it still traveling from the center of the sun out of it, or is it doing something in a kind of unusual, fascinating, exciting way that's taking that length of time?
Well,
just tell me, Louie. Tell me.
Okay. Well, Gamow, when I first encountered this, was in a book, and he's talking about the random walk. And basically, what's happening is that the photon keeps bumping into all the different bits and pieces that are in the sun, and therefore it's bouncing off this electron and bouncing off this molecule and bouncing off another molecule. This is a simplistic description of what's going on.
I like simplistic. Right? Simplistic is good.
It takes it 5,000 years of bouncing off all the different atoms, molecules, and everything that's going on inside the sun. It takes it 5,000 years to actually then get out. And he compares it to, say, a drunkard walking, trying to walk in a straight line, and instead it takes them, forever to get anywhere because they're walking backwards and forwards and round and about. And so I mean, first question is, is that interesting to learn?
So the first question to me, is it interesting? Yes, I think it is officially. Now, happy to be challenged by anybody else saying that's not, we're going, so what? But no, I think if you're broadly interested in the nature of the universe and even things like what photons and so on are and how they work, yes, because I think intuitively I would have gone nearer to the 8 minutes thinking, yeah, okay, that's what you mean by it. But to say that actually the light itself between being generated and then reaching your face is actually much, much longer. And the vast majority of that is being it passing essentially, well, what's happening? Why is it doing that within the sun? And it's not doing similar thing between the sun and here. Well, is it not hitting other molecules?
No, because I mean, space.
Okay.
This is where I now reminded you said you weren't going to work for NASA, so I can see why.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, space is a vacuum, and therefore there isn't, the light isn't bumping into very much on the way to Earth.
Okay.
And if it were, then it would be scattered away from us, so we wouldn't really see it. But that light is basically moving through the vacuum of space. And it takes 8 minutes. Inside the sun, there's lots of atoms and photons and electrons and particles and plasma and everything, and therefore the photon is bouncing around in there, and for it to get it just can't get out. It takes 5,000 years of it trying to get out. It's like trying to get out of a club at the end of a gig, and you're all very slow, and there's lots going on, and the women are going to the cloakroom, and the men are going to the toilets, and you're just bumping into each other. You can't get out, and eventually, once it gets out of the sun, it gets to the surface of the sun, and then that's it. It's on its way. And I mean, I find that to stand there in the sunlight and think, boy, think what 5,000 years is. I mean, I'm not a historian, but I mean, I think that's older than the pyramids, if you get me. That this photon started out, before most of human civilization had really taken place. Pretty interesting.
Fascinating stuff.
And you might say, well, Louie, I mean, what about the stars? I mean, those stars have taken millions and billions of years to travel to you. And I say, yeah, okay, fine. Those stars have taken millions and billions of years to get to you. And maybe the star doesn't exist anymore. But I think the sun, it's so close to us. I really don't think, I think, it puts things into perspective a little bit, doesn't it?
I do. And I think also whenever you start thinking about the distances that light travels and how it travels, again, it's very hard to relate back to your normal everyday life. So that's why I think one of the challenges would be. I want to just say, so the phrase in what you're talking about, though, which takes a little bit away from the specifics of light traveling from the sun to us, but it's this idea of the Drunkard's Walk. I was taken to the title of a book, and the guy's name, whose author it is, I think, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, Mlodinov or something.
Bless you.
And it's called, yeah, thank you. Mlodinov, say it again.
Bless you.
Someone will tell me I'm pronouncing that completely wrong. Mlodinow. One more time. Mlodinov.
Bless you.
The Drunkard's Walk, How Randomness Rules Our Lives.
Yeah.
So that is a book that I possess and have glanced at various parts of it, because I think it is very interesting. And there's one particular quote I happen to have to hand, which again, because my interest in things like randomness, chance, in quotes, luck, because when we talk more about my PhD background, it's on the psychology of luck. And we can talk more about that another time. But even just to say that in this book called The Drunkard's Walk, How Randomness Rules Our Lives, one quote is saying, "It may come as an epiphany merely to recognize the ubiquitous role of random processes in our lives. The true power of the theory of random processes, however, lies in the fact that once we understand the nature of random processes, we can alter the way we perceive the events that happen around us." And that's something that fascinates me. So this idea of, okay, use an example of where it does seem to be a perhaps genuinely random process that leads this photon to us, or if it's something which is at least, as you described it, almost a drunkard's walk. There's, it appears random, it appears difficult to predict. There's a huge amount of uncertainty around it. And what this guy's doing and what others have done is to explore how we make sense of that in our daily lives. And then I'm interested in the psychology of that. To what extent could we influence those kinds of events, if possible? Or if there genuinely are things that cannot be influenced, how we make sense of them, how we incorporate them into our lives. So that was the phrase that I was particularly drawn to, this idea of the drunkard's walk.
And I'm sure if we continue to do these podcasts, I mean, I know that we're both interested in randomness, the nature of randomness, and from psychological perspectives, from research perspectives, from science, its implications. I mean, is everything just random? What is randomness? These are interesting questions.
Indeed. Maybe for the next one, what's randomness?
Possibly.
Or one of the next ones.
I mean, I think I think we're going to reach limits of our knowledge. I mean, for anyone listening, we're both psychologists, and when we talk about these things, we're not professing. I mean, I'm speaking for myself here, but I'm sure Matthew agrees with me that we're experts on these topics. I mean, I feel like when I look at randomness, mathematical randomness, physical randomness, I feel like the Gamal, the telling the story of the sun. I feel like I'm an interested visitor to a land rather than I'm an expert on these topics. But
absolutely, and I would say that for all of that we were talking about, and even when we're on areas which we have more familiarity with in terms of psychology and parapsychology and related areas, we are still people who are, I feel, stumbling through some of this. So we'll pick up some of these questions in the next one, I think. So definitely the idea of randomness relates to, again, the nature of the universe, our role within it, how we deal with those kinds of questions. So on that note, let's say thank you, Louie, and we'll catch you next time.
Cool. And I'm glad that you said it was interesting. Otherwise, that would have been the end of the podcast. Okay.
There you go. Well, that's interesting, and we should explore more. Cheers for that.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.